SOCRA round. My name is Chinedu Ifeanyi, and I work here at the George and Faye Center for Healthcare Innovation as a clinical study monitor, and I'll be facilitating today's session. Before we continue, I just want to do a little bit, just remind us of a few items here that we can submit our any questions that we may have during the course of this session in the chat, and that also SOCRA members will receive certificates for 1 credit unit for this session, for this particular event. And now just do the land acknowledgement and then introduce our speaker, and we'll be good to go. So the Center for Healthcare Innovation is located on the ancestral and current day lands and waters of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Cree, Dakota, and Denisovan peoples, and on the land and on the national homeland of the Red River Métis. In northern Manitoba, we acknowledge the ancestral lands of the Inuit and gratefully acknowledge that our water is sourced from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation. At CHI, we respect the spirit, intent, and language within the treaties that were made on these lands and acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and present. So our speakers, we have Dawn Richards, PhD. She's the founder of 502 Labs, Inc. and director of Patient and Public Engagement at Clinical Trials Ontario. With a PhD in analytical chemistry from the University of Alberta and experience in a variety of roles over the past 20 years, our diagnosis with rheumatoid arthritis in 2006 started a journey to combine our passion for science with making the most of our diagnosis. In her role at Clinical Trials Ontario, Dawn is charged with executing on Clinical Trials Ontario's strategic pillar of patient and public engagement. Dawn has contributed to the literature and practice in patient engagement around compensation of patient partners, authorship with patient partners, recognizing patients as people with skills who lead fulfilling lives, and education around patient engagement in research. As a volunteer, Dawn is Vice President of the Canadian Arthritis Patient Alliance and a member of the BMJ's Patient Advisory Panel. Donna Lilly is a retired healthcare professional who spent many years in diabetes care management and treatment, which involved working with healthcare professionals across Canada and all levels of government. Donna continues to use her skills in volunteer activities with CIHR, that is the Canadian Institute of Health Research, Clinical Trials Ontario, and Sick Kids. As a member of Clinical Trials Ontario's College of Lived Experience, Donna is also on the leadership table of CAN Review, a pan-Canadian collaboration supported by the Accelerating Clinical Trials Consortium to enable a single research ethics review for multi-site clinical trials conducted across Canada, while ensuring the highest ethical standards. Donna recognizes the many challenges family and friends face within the healthcare environment, particularly in later years, and welcomes opportunities to influence change and support improvement with inputs from patients and caregivers. Donna stays active, playing tennis and golf, and spending time with our adorable grandchildren. I want to thank everyone for joining us, and I want to thank Donna and Dawn for agreeing to come on to share their expertise, experience, and insights. And I now welcome them to start their presentation.
Thank you, Chinedu. I think on behalf of Donna and myself, we'd like to thank Chinedu and the Winnipeg chapter of SOCRA for inviting us to be part of this session today, and to all of you who are joining today in advance for spending your time with us here. So I'll put up my slides for you. And I think Chinedu did a great job of introducing Donna and myself, so I'll just remind you that we're here today on behalf of Clinical Trials Ontario, And as Chinadu had said, I am the Director of Patient Public Engagement at CTO. And we're going to be talking today about partnering meaningfully with patients throughout clinical research. And Donna, is there anything you'd just like to add about yourself briefly before we move on?
No, I think that's great, Dawn. I think, again, we're delighted to be here. And from the perspective of the patient and caregiver and the roles that can enhance, hopefully, your research going forward.
Awesome. Thanks, Donna. Okay, so let's get to it. So we've got a couple of objectives today in our presentation. We'd like to explore effective strategies for meaningful patient partner engagement in clinical research. So you're going to learn through a case study that we're going to share with you about how patient partners can co-develop research questions. They can participate in all of the research activities, and they can contribute to sharing results, just like Donna and I are doing today here in this co-presentation. As we do that, we're also going to identify some supportive approaches and tools to help foster your collaborations with patient partners. So we're going to share a couple of tools and some of the resources that we've got available for you in your own work. And I know we're going to have time near the end of things for questions. Feel free to just put questions in the chat as they come up. Donna and I are just going to go through the presentation, and then we'll take as many questions as we can, and we'll see if we get to them all. If we don't, I'm sure we can find ways to answer any leftover questions as well. So just briefly, in case you're not familiar with Clinical Trials Ontario, which you'll hear me refer to as CTO, CTO is set up by the provincial government in Ontario, so it's primarily supported by the province. And it was really created just over 10 years ago to help support the environment in Ontario to do clinical trials. There are 3 strategic priorities. The one that Donna and I are going to focus on today is the engage priority. And in the engage priority, there are kind of two kind of prongs to that. One is helping provide credible and trustworthy information so that people can make decisions about participation in clinical trials for themselves. And the second one there is engaging with patients and the public to create better trials and better trial initiatives. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Okay, so Donna is a member of CTO's College of Lived Experience, and we often just call it the college. The college is a group of about 25 people, and they work with me in everything that I do at CTO, and they also help out some of my colleagues at CTO as well. So there's lots of them. There's about 25 of them. And what brings them together and what's kind of interesting about what we do at the college is it's that common thread of being interested in clinical trials. Some of them have participated in trials or had loved ones participate in trials. Some of them are just interested in trials. They come from all over the province. They're many different ages, and they're patients, caregivers. In some cases, they're just members of the public. And I don't mean they're just members of the public, but they are members of the public. And they've got different experiences with different conditions, diseases. And again, it's not their disease experiences necessarily that they have in common here. So we've got people from all different kinds of backgrounds in the college. So as I mentioned, they advise me on the work that I do at CTO and some of my colleagues' work as well. They're also available to support projects outside of Clinical Trials Ontario. And some of the work that we've done has been me working closely with outside groups and the college so that college members can contribute to their projects. Sometimes when people aren't quite sure about how to engage patients in the public, this really helps them out. We kind of give them some hand-holding, and the college is a really safe group to work with. And then we've also watched the college mentor each other with respect to bringing opportunities from outside of CTO to each other. And so Donna, you're a member of the college. Is there anything you'd like to add to the slide before we move on?
Well, I think the other important thing about the college is the element of mentoring one another. But as part of that mentoring process, I think members of the college as well bring opportunities back to other members within that grouping. So it becomes a very back and forth, very fluid, and very expansive process for members that allows them to participate whenever they feel comfortable participating in special projects.
Awesome. Thanks, Donna. So one of the projects that we've developed with working with the college, so we've co-developed this, and Donna is really going to walk you through what this actually looks like in a research project. But we've worked on developing 5 best practices for engagement. So in the work we do, this is core and critical to all of our engagements with the college. And these are likely some things that will be really helpful for you. If you already engage patients as partners, maybe you'll see some of the things that are kind of ring true to you here. Or if you're planning on doing this, these are probably some things that will be helpful for you. So the first kind of best practice is having resources, including a budget to support engagement. So I can be considered a resource. I'm kind of the point person for the college. We've got other resources and people within CTO that also support the college. We are able at CTO to provide an honoraria for each of the different engagements that we have with the college. And while we haven't been doing a lot of this since actually today, I think is the 5-year anniversary of the COVID pandemic being declared. We haven't done a lot of this in the 5 years of COVID of doing in-person things with the college, but from time to time we still do. And an important part of that is being able to cover their travel and other expenses associated with us getting together. The second best practice here is about being flexible. So you might recall on the last slide that the college is a large group. There are about 25 members of the group. And because of that, we've kind of developed a bit of a process that works for the group in terms of being flexible. So it's difficult to get everyone to a meeting at the same time. So what we do is we set up, when we set up an engagement, we set up 2 meetings on different times and dates, and the meetings have the same agenda. And that way people can pick and choose which date and time works best for them. We tend to have one in the morning and we tend to have one near the end of the business day so that if people work, they can attend. If people don't work, they might choose the time during the day. We mostly do things virtually at this point with the group, but we do from time to time have in-person things. And if someone is really interested in the engagement that we're working on, but just can't make the meeting dates and times, then I'll set up a different meeting that works for them so that I can still gather their input and insights. They can still contribute, but they don't necessarily have the benefit of the larger discussion. But I still pull that into what we're working on together. Part of this work that's really important is communication. And what we actually do with the college is we use a software. It's actually a project management software that's called Basecamp. So instead of a whole bunch of emails flying back and forth, everybody has an account to Basecamp. Everything is available for people in Basecamp about meetings, about engagements, about what's expected of them to prepare for meetings, about how long that will take to prepare for our meetings. If I've got specific questions and things that we want to explore at those meetings, we post that out to people so that they can prepare and not be caught on the spot. And we also, this is a place where then we close the loop with the group and we can post things back into Basecamp about what happened to those conversations we had. If we've developed a resource together, where it is, how I learned from them, how I incorporate that into the work that we're doing. So super duper important for people to understand how their contributions actually contributed to a project. And sometimes those are one-off engagements and projects. And the project that Donna is going to talk about was a number of engagements over the course of about a year and a half and beyond. We're still working on it together. The last best practice that I want to emphasize is for us, engaging a large group has been really beneficial. In the early days of our patient public engagement work at CTO, we started with a small group. And that was okay for some of the intense projects we were working on. We were meeting quarterly in person with them for 1 to 2 days. But what we found is sometimes people had to leave that group because of life, because of health, family circumstances, etc. And our group got smaller and smaller. And the individuals who remained in the group, I think it's probably safe to say, felt some degree of pressure to either stay in the group or to show up at meetings knowing that if they weren't there, perspectives were not there. So with a large group, and this isn't going to work for everyone, but with a larger group, people can pick and choose what they're actually interested in terms of the opportunities for engagement. It allows them to feel really comfortable if they have to step back because of life and health. They know that someone else will be there to provide a patient public perspective. So this has worked really well for us. And I think probably if you're in the engagement space, usually here, you should at least have more than one patient partner, and it's for these types of reasons. So I know Donna's going to go through like what this actually looks like with respect to our research project. But Donna, from your perspective, is there anything you just like to kind of call out or emphasize here?
No, I think we're good right now, Dawn.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, so here's the example that Donna is really going to walk us through, and I'm just going to tee it up to get things started. So CTO conducted research that was in the form of a survey about decentralized and hybrid trials. And this actually came about in conversations really early in the pandemic, where we hosted some meetings with the college and with members of the clinical trials community. So at that point, we were talking about how trials had to pivot and clinical research had to pivot to, mostly being either virtual or being at sites that weren't central sites. And some of the people in the trials community who were operationalizing those aspects of things had a lot of questions. And so they were wondering what participants maybe thought about this, what people thought about some of this pivot. And so we had some members of the college in those discussions. But then we thought, the college is a small group of people, relatively speaking, and we've got the ability to actually maybe find out what a broader group of people in Canada think about this besides our kind of handful of college members. And what would we think about doing a survey together so that we could understand more about what people in Canada thought about decentralized trials, or trials that at least had some decentralized components in them. So over the course of a year, we worked really collaboratively with the college, and we brought on an epidemiologist, Dr. John Queenan, and John has an affiliation with Queen's University. So we co-developed a survey, we launched the survey, we analyzed the survey together, and now what you're seeing in real time is after we've co-written and published a peer-reviewed manuscript together, we're busy co-disseminating the results together. So Donna's actually been involved in more than one of these presentations, and we've had a number of other members of the college who've been part of this research project also sometimes even present on their own at meetings about this project together. So if you're interested, we've got the QR code here of our paper that was published almost exactly a year ago. And it's titled Patient and Public Perceptions in Canada about Decentralized and Hybrid Clinical Trials. It's about time we bring trials to people. And that last quote is actually from a participant in the survey. We thought that gem is too good. It has to go in the title of our paper. So really our study was aimed to assess the attitudes of potential participants towards decentralized components in trials. We'd aim to explore associations with different demographics related to the survey respondents as well. And I'm going to pass things over to Donna because she's going to walk you through how we worked with the college to do this research. And she's also going to walk you through the results of the research too. So Donna, I'll hand things over to you and you can just tell me when to advance if I don't anticipate that well enough.
Sounds great, John. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Yes, my intent here around just sort of the information we'll share is first and foremost, putting those best practices into action is a big part of what this survey did for us. And I'll sort of walk us through that one in a little bit more detail, and then we'll deal with results. So as Dawn suggested, the idea of a survey came from discussions within the college and other members of the clinical trials community. And over the process of about a year of back and forth and meetings and setting up, the issue became stronger. The intent became, well, maybe we could do this. And, I appreciate in the world that you work in, things may happen more quickly. But in this instance, I think the time that was involved in really making this come together was a true testament to how a real patient-partner relationship could evolve into something really very meaningful. As Dawn suggested, we function under a application or software called Basecamp. And this is our process for meeting and posting information, keeping in touch, that huge communication process about what we're doing. So as we progressed with this, about a week ahead of a discussion or so, Dawn particularly would post, okay, opportunity for a couple of meetings coming up. We're going to talk about A, B, C, and D. So everyone knew what the agenda would be. They were given information regarding honoraria if they choose to do that, and could respond about within their ability to attend. As part of that, I think what became important is that individuals actually did have to sign up for this process. It wasn't like, oh, well, okay, I'll try and make that meeting. It was, no, I sign up for this meeting and I go on to this meeting. And that was a process that I think allowed the work to sort of focus around who really did contribute in different ways to the process, and we could align that as the publication went forward. On a number of occasions, certainly when we were dealing with the reality of questions coming together, there were a lot more meetings involved in that process to get the wording right and to understand what we had to deal with that. As part of that, as well as developing the survey, we had a lot of fun testing the survey. So we would fiddle around with the survey, test it a little bit, look what the results looked like. It was that very active involvement that, was hugely rewarding to a patient participant in this type of study. And indeed, it was every step of the way, including the writing and publishing of the manuscript. Which for some was a process they hadn't particularly been through before. And so again, a huge learning process and a fun thing for them to be involved in. And as Dawn suggested, the other really important part, as we've sort of seen the paper in its format, is what we do from here. And dissemination has been a really important part. But that dissemination has also been facilitated by the fact that you have a wonderful resource like Dawn, and slides are prepared. They're available for people if they're doing a presentation. That sort of ensures they have the materials they need to sort of facilitate the information process going forward. So in full circle, we always went around and round, looped back, everybody comfortable. Do you have what you need? Everybody sort of okay with what's happening. And that's a very, very important part of the best practices, in my opinion, is to sort of constantly do that loop back to make sure that everyone's comfortable and aligned with what's happening at that particular point in time. So when the publication was submitted, we actually ended up with 6 authors, along with Dawn and John, and also 2 contributors. So it allowed us to sort of offer a nice little perk to patient partners. Next slide, please. So let's get to the part that's important in your world, which is the scientific rigor. And as Dawn suggested, we did have the incredible support of Dr. John Queenan, an epidemiologist at Queen's, who was with us along with Dawn throughout the process, ensuring that we got the right pieces in place, the right time, and obviously used important resources. So we ended up with a descriptive, cross-sectional, self-reported open survey administered by Qualtrics. The Center for the Information and Study of Research Participants' Annual Perceptions and Insights Survey in 2021 provided the framework for the questions. And we offered varying response options, including 5-point Likarts, multiple choices, ranked, and open-ended. Participants did go through an informed consent process, a very thorough one that outlined all of the issues, and also did some back checking. Because this was an online process, the idea of looking at IP addresses and ensuring no duplication became a very important part of the informed consent process. They then had the opportunity to respond to 2 sections, and the 2 sections were done very purposefully. They would each take about 10 minutes, but the first section included 39 questions that we absolutely wanted to make sure were answered. And a lot of that was around the demographics, and the information we'll talk about shortly. And the 42 questions being a little bit more optional, noteworthy for sure, but we sort of felt that some people might not feel they had the time to proceed to the second component, so offered that split. Recruitment followed, modification of the Dillman's total design method. We felt that the approach through the CTO, health charities, and patients organizations would be the valuable input for us. And it was shared between September and December with 3 checkpoints: 1 week, 6 weeks, and 12 weeks, to sort of encourage folks to, if they hadn't had the opportunity, perhaps entice them to consider doing it. The research was approved by Queen's Health Research Ethics Board, and as per their process, the information and the data was stored there as well. Next slide, please. So here's a bit of what we looked at. We looked at probably having exposure to about 5,000 participants, and it was our hope that a size of about 385 would give us a confidence level about 95%, with a margin of error of at about 5%. We did have 325 people, 23 with the French language, and we did offer it in both English and French. 248 completed section 1 and 169 completed section 2. And what you'll see here, and we'll talk about it more as we go along too, the average age was about 51 years of age. So we had a span of 20 to 83. The majority, 55%, were aged 50 and over. 77% were women. And I would say it was a bit of a whoa when we first started looking at the results, because normally women aren't overly represented in research. And I know Dawn will have some additional comments about that. But they were also highly educated response, 85% Caucasian. So the diversity ethnicity issue, I would say, was an issue we might have been disappointed about, but we had no sense of how that would work going into the survey as well. It certainly was our hope that within the groups that we were offering the survey to, we would see some of that more clearly. But that was something that we learned going forward. These were for the 45% working, 55% retired, and actually their income put them in a higher category of income. And our geographic location was pretty much 68% central Canada. We did have some interesting issues with ethics reviews, and perhaps something you've run into as well, is that we'd hope for some broader scope here beyond where we were in central Canada, but got pushback if ethics reviews were not undertaken in those local environments. So I think that was a learning as well, sort of for us. Next slide, please. This was a really interesting slide for us in the demographics area, where we asked 3 questions: how they would consider their health, did they have chronic health condition, and did you or have you had a life-threatening illness? So interestingly enough, 60% said they felt their health was pretty good, but 68% or more did live with a chronic healthcare condition. Coming from the chronic disease work, I think that's great that they think they're sort of really healthy and doing well. But nonetheless, this is a population, in our opinion, that is linked to the healthcare system. So they are users of the healthcare system, perhaps more than others, hard to say, but also probably very highly aligned with sort of issues of importance to them, how clinical trials can be important to them, and very tuned in to probably wanting more on health. And perhaps that's just a bit of my take on it. But when we looked further, 40% of them had participated in a clinical trial, or 29% had cared for someone participating in a trial. So overall, 79% of them were pretty informed about clinical and trials. And as part of that discussion, again, which we found quite interesting, is they felt that it was important to provide options for study visits. So this was a group, even though it might have been a very sort of specific group, they'd been through the clinical trials process, and they knew or had a sense of what would make a difference to them in support of the decentralized clinical trial process as well. Dawn, did you want to add any more on that one, or?
No, I think that was pretty good. I think, we just had conversations as a college, just so that people know. At first was like, oh, geez, we've got like this group that's kind of highly educated about trials, but then we sort of flipped it on its head and we thought, okay, but these people actually know what it's like to participate in a trial. So when they're answering these questions, it's from that lived experience versus someone who's never participated in a trial, and it's much more a hypothetical for them. So just adding a bit of context to what you've said here already, Donna.
Great. Okay, next. Yeah. Informed consent. Well, informed consent in healthcare environments, you very specifically know how important it is. And also, I suspect know how much of a challenge it can be sometimes, ensuring that it's done the right way, it's following certain ethical processes, the legal issues are all dealt with, and has to be done in a certain way around a certain environment. It's been very much a part of what we've all grown up with informed consent. But for these folks, they didn't see it as that much of a big deal. They felt things like informed consents could be done at home rather than having to go into a main study site. They obviously would prefer to do it using something like what we're using today, where they can see the person they're talking to and go through the process with them. And they were okay to sort of proceed that way. They would not necessarily have done it over a phone. They were sort of not so clear on that one. And they still would voice concerns or have concerns that their privacy was still protected as part of this process, but open to the fact that it could be done perhaps in a different way than many of them might have experienced through their clinical trial process. Next slide, please. So regarding participation, communication, we all know, is so important in everything we do. And it's a big part of dealing with patient partners, dealing with anybody, that they are in the loop, they understand what's going on, and they are supported with the things that are important to them. So these folks, 64% were concerned about handling adverse side effects. And 66% of them felt somewhat concerned about potential complications. But as we dug deeper on some of those things as well, they felt that they had good suggestions about how that could be handled. Point person, someone to go to, websites, areas that they can look to get help, all part of the process that if they're not actually at a study site, they can have access to supports outside of a study site. 35% were willing to travel more than an hour to participate. And this was an interesting one as well, I would say. And even though one would suggest when we looked at our results, they might be skewed a little bit more urbanly, even within an urban environment, anything that's going to take me longer than an hour or more than an hour to even get there tends to potentially have some issues aligned with it. People talked about the fact that, often it depends on whether somebody has to take them, whether they have childcare, whether it's going to cost them money, how is it going to influence their days. So that became a feature that if we could perhaps deal with timing, may provide more accessibility to people as well. And 72% wanted or felt strongly that routine and simple tests could be done close to home, that they were totally comfortable, not necessarily that they had to come into a study site to get a blood sample taken. So they felt that could sort of really be an important part of decentralized process as well. John, anything further there?
I think the other thing that I'll add is with respect to people being concerned about handling adverse events and potential complications. This was another conversation we had with the college, and many of those members have participated in trials, and they said, you know what, whenever you're in a trial, this is one of your really big concerns. So they added some context about the fact that this, might be the same whether you're participating in a trial where you go to a central site. You're still going to be worried about handling adverse events and complications, or if you're doing a decentralized trial. So that was just one of those areas where it was interesting to have conversations with participants where we could kind of layer some context about potentially what we were hearing from the survey respondents too.
So data collection, 59% weren't concerned about providing information via technology. I think it's a world we've all grown into and are all feeling more comfortable with as we go along. About 43% were somewhat concerned about a third party accessing their records. And for at least 40 were somewhat concerned about privacy of shared data. So those issues were very much part of the data collection, but they had a clear preference as well for, type, voice technology, patient diaries as process that they could participate in and put the data in as well. And along with that, however, they wanted very clear instructions. How does this work? How do I do this? Am I doing it the right way? And IT support and access to that IT support to make sure that they were doing things as required and not sort of providing any difficulty to the process. As well, we talked about the delivery of investigational products to home, obviously would be a part of a decentralized clinical trial. And again, they felt pretty comfortable about that, as long as clear instructions. What am I supposed to do when I get it? How do I handle it? Is there an issue regarding timing that I have to deal with? But the actual fact of the product coming to the home did not appear to be an issue to them. Dawn?
Yeah, this was another one where we had great discussions, and this was like kind of early in the pandemic, and people were like, I'm having deliveries to my home like multiple times a week right now. People don't know if it's the Amazon person, food delivery. They're not going to know, if this is for a clinical trial. So maybe concerns that people would have had pre-pandemic before we kind of pivoted to this more virtual world, there weren't a lot of concerns about this type of thing.
So, potential benefits. The participants, in essence, told us, or 88% of them thought it would be easier to participate overall in a decentralized clinical trial. They thought it would provide more flexibility. And 56% thought it would require less time investment. And 56% thought out-of-pocket costs would be less as well. So for trials as a whole, 91% thought this could improve accessibility to trials for people in Canada. And 85% thought it could potentially increase the diversity of clinical trial participants. And I know that those of you who work in this world, and I've always been on the other side of it, but aware of that, recruitment is one of your biggest challenges in a clinical trial. And if we could make that better and more accessible and get the more diverse population, not only would your work be even more outstanding than it already is, but it would add a very valuable component to clinical trials. And these folks were saying, if we looked at the opportunities for decentralized, things could move in that direction. Dawn?
Awesome. Thanks, Donna. So Donna's already touched a little bit on some of the limitations of our work, but we'll call them out again, just to be thorough here. So we talked a lot about the respondents to the study. They may not be representative, given that many of them have actually participated in trials. We know that that 40% of people themselves participating in trials is very different from sort of the general population. We know that they were predominantly white, upper middle class women, which from actually online survey data tends to be who fills out surveys. As Donna mentioned, that's also interesting in itself, given that women have traditionally been underrepresented in trials. So for us to do a survey about trials where their voices kind of came through more loudly was sort of interesting, and mostly from urban locations. So we tried on the diversity front. We clearly didn't try hard enough, and that's an area for improvement. We had, I'd argue that most people had kind of were in the know about trials already, who probably saw the survey come across their email, their social media feed, et cetera. And that's probably representative in the responses that you'll see. We know that people needed an internet connection to participate, which, can be limiting. And that was something we knew going into it. And while Donna mentioned the study was approved by an REB, but there were some REBs that wouldn't accept that. They felt very strongly that they needed to review the survey to allow people at their sites to be able to share it. And in some other jurisdictions, they felt strongly about having a PI on the study from their jurisdiction before, and a local REB review before they could be allowed to share freely. So just some interesting things that happened at the REB level that we thought worth sharing as well. And so just to kind of close out, to bring us back to our objectives, we really hope that you got a chance to take away what our best practices for CTO and what we've co-developed with our College of Lived Experience members related to engagement. In the patient and public engagement world, and I know based on your work, you're all very used to following a protocol, following things very methodically. And I'm going to break it to you gently here that there isn't a protocol for patient and public engagement in what you do, but I can assure you that the best practices like the ones that we've developed and you tailoring those to your specific project or initiative are a great way to start. We shared some QR codes for you about some of our dedicated resources that we've got available online. And honestly, I know Donna and I are happy to be contacted if we can't get to your questions here today in terms of how we work with one another. we really hope that you take away too that the College of Experience contributes to CTO projects, but I want to put out an offering for you that they also contribute to non-CTO projects, and they don't have to just be in Ontario. So if you're thinking, I'd really like to do some engagement work, don't know where to start, maybe I can have a conversation with the college about it. Yes, please feel free to approach me. I'd be happy to work with you on what that could look like. Happy to kind of help you along as you get comfortable with engagement. And I'll come back to the fact that we'd be really happy if our engagement approach or elements from our engagement approach and our best practices are taken by others and applied and adapted to other projects. I'll just give you a little sneak peek that one of the projects that Donna and some of our colleagues are working with me on right now is we're actually co-writing what we hope will be a peer-reviewed published manuscript on how CTO has been working with patients in the public over the past few years. So hopefully in the next few months, that's something that we can share more broadly with you as well. So with that, I know Donna and I are happy to take some questions in the next 15 minutes or so. My email address is there, and I'd be happy, if you'd like to reach out. I think Donna can put her email address in the chat if she feels comfortable, and if not, also happy if you've got things for Donna, I can always pass them on to Donna as well. Donna, any closing comments from you?
No, I think I would just add that number one, I think we both thank you for taking the interest in this topic. I think it has been an incredible experience from my perspective to participate not only in this project, but others. And so I would encourage you, I know it's a very big part of the research world now, is to include patient participation. And I know you're all geared to that, but consider putting yourself in that position as well. It's incredibly rewarding when you look at it from the other perspective as well, and you can see it from two different angles. So, we hope it just might spark some interest for you to kind of consider some of these issues. And I'd be happy to put my email in the chat. I will do that.
Okay, great. So thanks, everyone. I think we're open to questions now. And I think Chinadu might actually have a question that was kind of pre-submitted that will kind of kick things off.
Thank you, Donna and Don, for your presentation. So we got this question before today. Just gonna read it out here. So it goes this way. In a longitudinal observational study that has an advisory group comprised of the research team and also patient partners, where the advisory group is involved in co-developing the protocol, research questions, primary and secondary outcome, and also continues to meet biannually or quarterly. Are the patient partners who are part of this advisory group also able to be participants in this study?
Donna, would you like to answer that, or would you like me to, or how would you like to do that?
Well, I could jump in and obviously you can as well. But what I would say is I have been involved in a number of research projects as a patient participant, as they're sort of building protocols, looking at the actual project and having that patient participation. And I think you're all aware of the fact that that's a very big part of a number of projects that are offered for funding right now, is the patient participant in what you're doing. So patients being involved in the early part of process, I think is great. But I would honestly say that I would undertake a process like that with an understanding that I'm involved in the project. I'm not necessarily going to be one that's going to participate in the actual research itself. I would, in my mind, perceive that as a little bit of a conflict of interest, but that just may be where I'm coming from. So Dawn, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think in this case, it's a longitudinal observational study. So I think it's difficult to answer that question. I kind of feel the same as Donna, where I would probably err towards keeping your patient advisory group to be non-participants in the actual study. I guess it depends how many participants in the study, and what's the potential for bias that is seen in the results because they've actually contributing to developing the study. But I think it's kind of one of those interesting things where maybe it's just really dependent on like what kind of information is being collected and what things, like maybe you're pulling administrative data, maybe they're not filling out surveys and that type of thing. So I think it's one of those things where there may be no clear answer that we can provide, but maybe some snippets that you can think about. Carly, I see your hand up. Do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, so I had another question after, but yeah, it is an interesting question. It's something that's come up a few times for us here at CHI as we've worked over the past many years in this area, particularly around rare disease site groups, where often there's a smaller population, we're a smaller province, folks are often receiving treatment at the same time that they're hoping to inform the research, and so there is a really fine line to walk there. Particularly in those scenarios, but I think it's a art as much as the science to try to navigate that line.
Yeah, really good points. Thank you.
Yeah. So one of the things that I was going to ask is if you're able to share your slides with participants today.
For sure, we can. Donna, are you okay with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I think there's lots to learn for folks at our organization that weren't able to make it, that I know are really, really interested in this area and really interested in expanding their engagement in clinical trials. So thanks very much.
Yep, really happy to do that.
So I don't see any questions in the chat. So I guess we'll be ending this session early. I want to use this opportunity to thank everyone. Thank you, Donna and Don, for sharing your expertise, experience, your research with us. I want to thank our executive director here at the George and Fahey Center of Healthcare Innovation, Carly Leggett, for coming to assist with the logistics. I'm sorry for dragging you from your busy schedule to come and do this. And I want to thank everyone that joined us today. We hope that you have gained some insights and that can be applied to your work going forward. And we hope to see you again in our future events. Thank you, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.